Hello to the Association of Chinese Canadian Entrepreneurs and happy International Women's Day. I'm Mary Ng, Canada's Minister of Small Business, Export Promotion and International Trade, and Member of Parliament for Markham Thornhill. For over 25 years, the Association of Chinese Canadian Entrepreneurs, or ACCE, has been at the forefront of supporting women's futures. With events like today's, the Women Entrepreneurship event, ACCE is once again championing the prosperity and economic empowerment of women. In my riding of Markham Thornhill and across Canada, Chinese Canadian business owners have relied on ACCE's support, encouragement, and empowerment as they start up, grow, and become leading members of our business communities. Now, as we look forward to the road to recovery, I know that ACCE's role in our community will be even more important. Throughout COVID-19, we have witnessed an alarming rise in anti-Asian racism and discrimination, which Asian-owned businesses have felt across the board. In tandem with this, we continue to see reports that women entrepreneurs have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. They're more likely represented in some of the hardest hit sectors. This is why ACCE's work in supporting Asian women-led and owned businesses is critical, not only to surviving this pandemic, but to sustain the gains that we've already made in women's economic advancement. Looking ahead to our shared future and recovery from COVID-19, we know that supporting women is the smartest thing that we can do. By advancing gender equality, we can add up to $150 billion to the Canadian economy, and if the world follows suit, $12 trillion to the global economy. These aren't just numbers, these are opportunities. This is why, in 2018, our government invested nearly $5 billion in the new first ever Women's Entrepreneurship Strategy, a cross-government initiative that I lead. This investment provides women entrepreneurs and business owners with access to financing, support networks, and expertise so that they can start up, scale up, and expand and access new markets, including international markets secured by Canada's 14 trade agreements. And to ensure that we don't lose the gains that we've made in women's economic advancement, our government invested an additional $15 million to the Women's Entrepreneurship Ecosystem Fund to support women-owned businesses throughout this crisis. And that's not all. Our government's approach to supporting the success of women in business goes further than direct investments and emergency supports. Taking action means supporting women in a kaleidoscope of ways, from income supports for raising children to paid parental leave to universal childcare. This means legislating pay equity, having a strategy to address gender-based violence, and making inclusive investments to ensure that women-owned businesses grow in Canada and around the world. These are more than social policies. These are important economic policies, and they will be critical to our recovery from COVID-19. So this International Women's Day, I want to encourage every single Canadian to take action in ways big and small to support women and advance gender equality, and know that your government is right there with you. And again, I want to thank ACCE for leading the way in this important work and supporting your community and the women who make it so special. To the women out there, keep pushing those boundaries and turn your innovative ideas into successful businesses. Know as you step up, your government and your community will too. Thank you, and happy International Women's Day.
Woohoo! Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Mary Ng. Next, I would like to introduce our event sponsor, Scotiabank. And Amy Wong, my co-chair, will be speaking on behalf of Scotiabank.
Good evening, everyone. There are many challenges women face on their path to success when starting, sustaining, and growing a business. In 2018, women-owned business contribute $150 billion to the Canadian economy and employ over 1.5 million people. And women-led companies receive 4% of venture capital investment dollars in Canada. The Scotiabank Women Initiative launched in December 2018 to support raising awareness of the unconscious bias and help address the systematic areas in financial services that impact the growth potential of women-led businesses. The initiative is a comprehensive program to help women-led business through three key pillars: access to capital, mentorship, and education. The program has committed to allocate $3 billion to funding over the first 3 years to help women to take their business to the next level. In December 2020, the Scotiabank Women Initiative launched a new digital hub in collaboration with Shopify, Google Canada, LinkedIn, Facebook, and HubSpot, focused on delivering key resources to help women entrepreneurs adapt to uncertain economic times. Please visit scotiabankwomeninitiative.com for more details. And please connect with your business advisor or myself if you want to learn more. I'm going to leave my contact in the chat box. If you want to have any question, please reach out. So thank you, enjoy the evening, and happy International Women's Day. Thank you.
Karen, you're on mute. I think you're trying to introduce Eva.
So sorry. Okay, thank you. So our fireside chat is about to start, but please remember to stick around to the end of the event for our lucky draw. We have 38 pairs, 38 pairs of blue light glasses from Mars Quest to be giving out to celebrate this event. So I have my honor to introduce a very, very special guest, Eva Lau. She's a well-respected entrepreneur turned investor and one of the few women leading a venture fund in Canada. She's the founding partner of Two Small Fish Ventures, a venture fund that invests globally in early-stage transformative tech companies with strong network effects. Before starting Two Small Fish Ventures, she was Wattpad's head of community and content. She helped nurture and scale Wattpad from its infancy to become one of the largest online communities with tens of millions of users around the world. And in January this year, Naver, the South Korean internet conglomerate, announced the acquisition of Wattpad in a transaction valued more than 600 million. And finally, I would like to present our moderator today, Michelle Kwok. Our talented Michelle, she was also our moderator at our last event. Michelle is a born and raised Vancouverite, medical science student turned social entrepreneur. She co-founded FLIK Flick with the website weareflick.com, a platform connecting female founders, leaders, and students across the world via meaningful apprenticeships. She has been recognized at YWCA Young Women of Distinction in 2020 and a conversationalist Gen Z honoree. Okay, I'm gonna pass it over to you, Michelle.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and happy International Women's Day, everyone. As you might see, I recently got our own branded Flick hoodie that Eva has as well, but her daughter stole.
Yeah, she stole it. She said, the color is so pretty, Mom, can I have it? I'm like, oh. Well, you know what? One day you'll be a woman entrepreneur, so yes, you can have it.
So that's what this day is all about. I have interviewed Eva before, and we know each other pretty well, so I'm really excited to dive into her story. So Eva, why don't we just start from the beginning to give everybody some context? We've spoken about this before, but when you were growing up, I know your family always wanted you to be an engineer, not an entrepreneur. So how is that going through your degree in engineering, especially knowing that it's a male-dominated field, and then you went into startup, which is also a male-dominated field?
Yeah, so I guess, my story goes like this. I was born and raised in Hong Kong, and I came here to Canada when I was a teenager and finished my high school here and get into U of T engineering right afterwards. I remember when I was very, very young, maybe a toddler or maybe 4 or 5 years old, my mom would have told me, she said, remember, you're a girl. Your cousins, meaning that, my father's brothers' kids, they are boys. Do your best to show them you're much better than them. Don't bring shame to the family. So that was my upbringing. My upbringing was like, make sure you outshine the boys. Don't bring shame to the family. So when I finished my high school, and I was a visa student at the time, my family weren't here yet. And, I got accepted. Well, actually, I was, planning to apply to school. And my mother said, well, you know what? You only have 4 choices, or 5. You can either be an engineer, a lawyer, a doctor, an accountant, and I forgot what the other one was. But basically, it's all the professions,
like
that
finance or something.
Finance or accountant, something like that. And I'm like, I don't want to be an accountant, you know, it's kind of boring. In the medical field, not my stuff, lawyer, my English was not my mother tongue. So, and certainly not a field that I want to go in. So what that left me was engineering. So I'm like, okay, so I got into engineering. And certainly it was a difficult field, you know, to be in, especially at the time when I was in engineering school. Maybe I was one of the 15% in the whole cohort. It was very hard because on the good side, you know, you're kind of being courted by a bunch of guys because, you know, there were only a few girls in the engineering department. So, you know, you got lots of what we call suitors to kind of like pursue after you. But at the same time, you felt so bad about yourself. And I actually got a comment on my Insta saying that, oh, you know, you must be, you know, so proud of being engineering, you know, one of the few women. The fact was, I was very envious to all the girls that have the opportunity or the luxury to dress nice, you know, to have makeup and high heels and walking on campus, because we were in sweats, and because we have to blend in, we have to be like one of the dudes. Not that, you know, they were trying to put us down or whatever, but, you know, the natural instinct for us was to blend in, to be one of them, to forget our feminism and become one of the guys. So when I got into startups, you know, at the time, it was even harder, because when you were in school, you were just basically, you know, hanging out with a bunch of dudes, you know, about your age. But when you're in a work corporate environment, then it's totally different. I always walk into a meeting being the only woman in the room, with men that are, you know, in the 30s, in the 40s, in the 50s, and white dudes, you know, they all, you know, looked at me as if, I don't think that they have any bias in a way, but subconsciously speaking, they certainly was looking at me as kind of like a little girl in the room. So it took,
just like whatever.
Yeah, it took me quite a while to really outperform others in order to advance in my career. So those were the days when, you know, working in the tech world. I think it's pretty much the same still in some ways nowadays, but certainly back then, the paradigm was even stronger. I remember when I was actually hosting a meeting, I was one of the senior leadership in the team at the time for the project, and I was leading the meeting. The team was, I think maybe at the room, there were about 40 male engineers. I was the only woman, and I was hosting the meeting. And then it was a, you know, an hour and a half long type meeting. In the middle of it, people say, well, we got to take a break. And then my boss looked at me. Can you go get me a coffee? I'm like, are you joking me? Well, lucky that I had a very good relationship, and we took jabs into, you know, each other often. So I looked at him in my side eyes and I'm like, excuse me, why don't you get it yourself? And then, you know, I kind of straightened him out, you know, in a humorous way, but certainly that's what I meant, you know, the subconscious bias.
Yeah. Did you feel like your background in engineering going into startup helped you with that? Because I remember you telling me that you walked into a room at U of T and you were literally the only woman in the room in engineering. And then same thing in startup, right?
Absolutely. See, the thing is, I think, you know, in engineering, as I said, one of the 15%, and sometimes, you know, when the girls are in one corner and you walked in, you know, you see a sea of men. It, you know, I think, you know, in that environment, it really trained me that I'm like, hey, I'm just one of the guy or one of the person in the room, and I just have to do whatever it takes to just, you know, get works done. It really, really helped me when it comes to working in a tech community. I work at a software company. I even work at a hardware company. Hardware is even worse because I study industrial engineering, and you know, they tend to have a higher ratio of women anyway. Maybe not 15%, maybe 18% per se. But when you're in the hardware business, electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, they're even more male dominated back then. So imagine when I was working in a hardware company, not only do I have to deal with the typical engineers, you work into the manufacturing plant, they're all men, you know, commanding all the other people. And, but lucky that I really do have that kind of support, I should say, not only from my training in engineering, but there are some great mentors in my life. Though they are men, they have been very supportive.
Amazing. Yeah, you talked a little bit about how you worked in a couple of startups before. So after working for a couple of those startups, how did you and your husband decide, you know, it's the right time to start a company? And I mean, it was Wattpad, and now it's sold for $600 million. So how did that idea first come about, and how did you think, you know what, we don't have to work for someone else anymore, let's work for ourselves?
You know what? I actually prepared some pictures, you know, of kind of like a slide. I would love to show everyone, and you know, to tell you the story. I think that will be a fun one to tell. So let me share my screen, and here, yeah, that's the one. Let me see if I can do a present mode. All right. So that's me and my husband when we were in teenagers. So back then we didn't have an iPhone, so you can see that the pictures were blurry, you know, all those kind of things. And then after dated many years, sorted out our career, we got married and have a baby and a dog. This moment is actually worth talking about because just before I gave birth to my firstborn, it was actually the internet.com bubble days. So I was working in a tech incubator called Brightspark Labs. Right now, Brightspark is a venture firm, but back then it was an incubator. So think about very much like a tech accelerator that they incubate startups, multiple ones. And I took on the role as a director of product development and help multiple startups at a time to find a product market fit. So I work with, you know, let's say in one team as the VP of engineering, help them to build the engineering team, or I would be helping another company as the business strategist to figure out, you know, what experiments should we be doing to validate some of the assumptions. So it was a very, very exciting time. You know, imagine the dot-com days, there are many different business models were coming up. And, but at the same time, I was very, very exhausted. Think about not only were you working in one startup, you were actually working with multiple startups. It's always a game of chasing time and watching out for competitors. So it was a very, very stressful time. And so when I have my first child, I decided to take some time off. And you can say take a breather, but at the same time do a reset. And during that time, I did my MBA part-time. So crazy enough that people say, how can you have time for study? Well, actually, that was the time that I cherished the most. Because during the day, I will be singing Disney songs and princess songs and vacuuming the house. And it was extremely mundane and not me. So when I had the opportunity to study MBA part-time at York, I just took it. I just think, you know what, that was the most productive time. I get surrounded by people who are actively pursuing something more intellectual in their life. So I enjoy every minute of it. So this is the picture worth many words. So after I finished my MBA, I decided not to go back to the tech ecosystem and gave birth to another child. But at the same time, I was working in the field of market research. And that was when my husband, Alan, in 2006, told me that he wanted to quit his job, not only a job, a company that he co-founded at the time, and start a new startup with his co-founder, Ivan. I was like, are you nuts? I just finished my MBA and working on something else. We have two very young kids. And what on earth are you trying to do with, you know, creating application for people to read on a phone? Who on earth will do that? Remember, the phones that we're talking about are not iPhones and they are not Android phones. So we're talking about flip phones. So flip phones like that. How many lines of words can you read? But because both of us had been in the tech industry since we graduated from school, I met him in engineering school, and afterwards, you know, we worked in the same companies a couple times. And so I knew him very, very well. I knew that if he set his heart to do something, I want to be supportive, because I never wanted him to be, you know, thinking about what if I have done it, or what if I've tried it. You know, I don't like to live a life with regret. So I said, hey, let's just take a plunge and do it. So he started this company with Ivan. I don't know if you can see my cursor. So Ivan is right there at the back right here. And, that's him. That's my husband right here. So he worked on this company for a few years. It was very tough. So tough that we were at the brink of selling our house because the income that we got for all the advertising ads on our platform, guess how much we have for a month?
2,500 each.
Each month in the beginning of it, we're talking about 2007, 2008. It's $2 per check. $2.
What?
$2. So we have to split between two families. Okay. So after one coffee, we're done.
Wait, how did you survive this?
So we basically, continue to what I call dig into our debt hole and just accumulate a lot of debt. First of all, we use all of our savings, and then we accumulated a lot of debt. So that's what I meant. We were at the brink of selling our house in order to fund this stupid venture called Wattpad. But, that's where we kind of like really betting the whole thing on. In hindsight, it's kind of craziness, but at the time, it's something that we wanted to, he wanted to try. So lucky that, guess who saved the company? Steve Jobs. Yeah. Steve Jobs saved it. The reason is because he released the iPhone 3. And it came out to be a big screen with all these little, colorful screen and people waiting for apps on it. And Alan and Ivan, both of them, they are mobile tech guru. So they have long in, remember the Wattpad first generation was on the flip phones. When iPhone 3 came out, we were like that to have Wattpad on iPhone 3. So writing that inflection point of mobile computing, the adoption of Wattpad just kind of like picked up, and that's when I joined them. This office that you're seeing right now was only 200 square feet, and we have 11 people working in there.
So what was the mindset then when you were getting like $2 in the for the checks and you have kids? Like, what is your mindset at that point?
Go big or go home. We have no way back. Go big or go home. Obviously, me and Alan have agreed, both of us, we are still rational people. We said, if we have to lose the house, that will be the end of it. Because I don't want to kind of bet in such a way that we lose a house and then owe other people or owe whoever even more money. Then, it would be difficult to recover from there. But we know that, both of us are professionals. We both engineers. We have many years of experience. If we lose the house, worst case, then we'll just kind of like, move into a condo and then start from there again. Yes, we may have, lose a lot of things, but it's worth the try. So that's what happened, when we then finally got our first seed investment, and we fit 11 people in 200 square feet. Every time Ivan, sitting over here by the window, needs to go to the bathroom, he will stand up and everybody will scoot their chairs, right underneath the desk, kind of like Moses parting the Red Sea, and then he can walk right through and go to the bathroom. This is how we work, and this is how we operated. So at the same time, while I was helping him to build the company, I was also a mother. So it was very, very tough for me and also for the kids, because they didn't understand why mommy and daddy were working around the clock. And, going to the park, going to Wonderland, it's really a treat. And in hindsight, they gave up a lot too. They gave up a lot. And this is something that I wish I could have done better, but hey, we did our best. And let me see. So this is what happened in 2016. That's when we have our 10-year anniversary. So at that time, Wattpad has already been a multi-platform entertainment company. So not only do we allow people to share fictional stories chapter by chapter on our platform, very much like how people share pictures on Instagram and videos on YouTube. This is the time when they actually started using machine learning and AI to understand the stories much better than any human. Not only the story content, but the interactions around the stories much better than any human. So at the time, we can already predict the success of those stories at least 1 year ahead than the story actually become popular. So with the formation of Wattpad Studios, that's when we then taking some of the properties on Wattpad and turned them into TV shows and movies and books. Right now, this year, we have already have over 90 million monthly users on our platform, sharing at least 1 million new chapters every day. And we have over 500 million of story has already been shared. And right now, there are over 90 movie, TV show productions worldwide going on for our company. So that's Wattpad. And look at the smile, certainly night and day, I would say, compared to the first one. And, we are also very proud in the, Alan and Ivan, both of them have been named one of the top 50 most influential people by Toronto Life twice. So certainly have been a journey. And as you said in the beginning, Naver will be acquiring Wattpad for at least 600 million US. So we are very proud to where we are. And I left the company actually a while back in 2014 and become a VC right now. So I focus in investing in tech companies.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing the story. So that was a great segue into that. To the next question is, what are some of the key takeaways from your experience at Wattpad? And, why did you make that decision to leave?
The key takeaway with my experience in Wattpad, I would say you have to find something that you love doing and you understand the reason why you were doing it other than just making money. You have to understand how difficult it was when you only get a $2 per month in terms of income for a couple of years. Unless you love what you're doing, you wouldn't be able to do it. You would have given up long ago. And I'll tell you a couple of stories why we kept going. So during the early days when I'm talking about pre-iPhone days still. So when Alan and Ivan were still struggling with the flip phones, Wattpad has already been used by users all over the world, including users in Africa. So I remember, I think it was late 2007 or early 2008. That's around the time frame. Alan got an email from a user in Africa, and it says, "Thank you for creating Wattpad. For our country, buying books is just too expensive and difficult. And now with your app, we can read stories written by people from all over the world. Thank you for bringing literacy to our country." I mean, that's much bigger than bringing $1 billion home, right? It's bringing $1 billion to other people's homes. And that had been the drive that we were on the right path. We're doing something more than just building a tech company, but we are actually transformational to people's life. I remember when I joined them in 2009, just before they raised the seed round, because they were just overwhelmed with work. And, given my background in tech, it was a very natural thing for me to go in and help them. And then I took over the community and basically become the face of the company in front of the users. And I remember receiving an email from a woman in her mid-20s, and she said to me, "Eva, when I was in Form 5, she was from Britain, my teachers told me that I'll be nobody. I'll be always an average person. So I gave up long ago because that's what they told me. I found a job as a receptionist and clock day in, day out, go to bars afterwards. And then one day I was so bored and I had no money to buy books. And I just searched free books and I bumped into Wattpad. I was reading stories, find it fun, and decided to start writing my own. Today, when she was writing to me at the time, she had over 50,000 followers following her.
Wow.
And she said, Wattpad changed my life. And she eventually became one of the New York Times bestsellers. So you tell me, is startup just about making money?
I totally agree. I think it's really difficult to be a startup founder and you really, really feel the ups and downs of it. I can definitely attest to that. There are days when I'm like, what is happening? and totally at the beginning, you pretty much make no money. And I think that a lot of people do glamorize the idea of becoming a startup founder, being an entrepreneur and becoming a billionaire. But it's not about that, right? It's like in those early days when you have no money, everyone around you has no money, and you're bringing on team members and they realize the company doesn't have that much money. It's like everybody is must be driven by the mission, must be driven by the vision, the values, and you have to make that really clear from the get-go. So I love how you talked about that.
Right.
Yeah, I would love to hear a little bit more then about, since we know you left. So when was that moment you decided you wanted to get back into entrepreneurship, and why on the VC side? Why didn't you just start another company?
Well, see, the thing is, it was actually, in some ways you can say it's a mental health issue, but at the same time, I would say it's a woman instinct. Because, at the time when Alan raised Series B, he actually raised the money as one of the largest investment from a Silicon Valley VC firm in Canada. And, certainly very proud of what he had done, what he could achieve, but I was exhausted. Not only was I exhausted, my kids were really, really lacking when it comes to support from the parents. I kept saying, I could outsource housekeeping, not a problem. I could even outsource cooking, not a problem, but I can never outsource mothering. So I decided to, take a step back and spend some time with them. I remember one evening, I think my daughter was in grade 4 or grade 5, and she was struggling with a math question. And because during the day, I have to answer emails from people all over the world, like particularly in the North American time zone or European time zone. But at home after dinner, I'll be answering emails from people in the Asian time zone. So it was literally around the clock, literally.
Right.
And one night she said, Mommy, I need help with my math here. I said, no problem, give me 2 minutes. As soon as I'm done, I'll come over. And I have to tell you that I still don't know what that question was today.
Wow.
Right? So it was a natural thing for me to do. So I took some time off, but obviously being a person who I keep saying that I'm in undiagnosed ADHD, I was very bored at home. I'm like, what do I do now? Initially it was more like making myself available to some early stage founders. One of them are BizTrip, back in the days. Now it's Bitmoji, and then later on being acquired by Snapchat. I wouldn't say that I was consulting. It was just more like about, I've built Wattpad, you have questions, come ask me. And, initially it was just for fun. And then I spot some opportunities. I'm like, hey, I want to invest in this too. Hey, I want to invest in that too. But most importantly is, as I continue to talk to entrepreneurs, I found out one problem in the Canadian tech ecosystem. If we look at Silicon Valley, you go into any Starbucks, chances of you're going to bump into an early stage employees of another startups who are grinding or being, or who may have even got success. They may be early stage employees of Uber or, early stage employees of Facebook. It must be relatively easy. But in Canada, we don't have that kind of luxury to easily bump into someone who have been there and done that. And I said, Alan and Ivan are still very busy building Wattpad, and all the other founders, like Shopify, they're growing exponentially, but all the founders are still, working on the company, where I am actually available. So I decided to basically make myself more available, and very quickly tech ecosystem, like, the tech accelerators, VCs, they all came to me and say, hey, I have a company, you may be helpful. You want to take a look? I know you're angel investing. If you, the thinking is, if I put money in the company, then I want them to be successful as well. So by extension, then I'll be supporting them. So very quickly, I become a person that gets sucked into the ecosystem so much that I found myself looking at 300-400 companies per year. And it was certainly way too much work that I have to fund myself. And not only that, there are actually investors asking me, hey, Eva, can you invest for me as well? When are you going to raise a fund? And then there's startups saying, hey, Eva, I wish you can write a bigger check. Love you to be an angel, but would love you to be able to kind of bring more impact. So in 2019, I said, you know what, maybe timing is right for me to raise a venture fund. Not only do I recycle my capital, but I also want to use this as a vehicle to nurture the next generation of tech giants in the ecosystem. So that's why I become a VC.
I love that. That's amazing. I didn't even realize it came from the angel investing. I think a lot of women also want to get into angel investing, so that's cool to hear. So as going back to, our theme of International Women's Day, as one of the few females leading a VC fund in Canada, what do you feel like you uniquely bring to the table, and why do you think it's important to elevate other women in VC? I am one of those women that I call out all white dude board often. Particularly early stage founders, they are actually very coachable. They all understand that, for us who have been there and done that, we point out these weaknesses, not to kind of make them feel bad, but to help them to grow. So there are many, many, many times that I have, talked to founders or, learn about their companies. Their product clearly, it's have the power to become global company that works for everyone, and women users on their platform, it's going to play an important role in the growth. But I look around the leadership team, or I even look around the board of directors that they have put together, I would just say, dude, something is seriously wrong right here. Wow. Like, how can you have a product that, the success is quite rely on women users, and yet everyone in the leadership team had no clue how a woman think? So I am the one who keep pushing, not necessarily, I know that there's some funds that purposely invest in women founders, which is great. But I think, for me, not only do we need to do that, but we need to basically push the diversity DNA in the founders very, very, very early on. So when, I actually remember talking to one company, and I point out a few of those things. And I said, look, your product, one of the most vulnerable group that I can see are the LGBTQ community. What are you doing? Do you know anybody? Do you have anyone, that is actually representing their voice in your leadership team and also in your board of directors? And I was just basically challenging them. And then one of the founders actually said, you know what, I'm so glad to hear this, Eva. I don't do this often, but I actually belong to the LGBTQ community. So to me, that's important. That's ultra, ultra important. Do you have the diversity DNA right from the get-go? We're not talking about checking metrics here of like, I have 50% this, 40%. You have to have this, yeah. Like, I don't care. What I care is, do you have the DNA? Do you have that mindset? That gives power to people that are not necessarily belonging to those vulnerable groups or a marginalized group, but be allies to them. Right. And also allies. Exactly. Making those spaces more inclusive, realizing that you're also going to increase your customer base if you do have that diversity DNA from day one, and you are creating a community from the very, very beginning that's going to be inclusive.
Yes.
Right. I love that. I'm just going to do our last prepared question here before we get into Q&A, because I know that we already have questions from those who registered for the event. But of course, everyone's here. They know that Wattpad just recently sold for $600 million and was recently acquired by Naver. So the question on everyone's mind, I think, is how do you build a startup that can go all the way to a successful exit? And what is some advice that you can give or key tactics that you have for founders out there today?
There are a couple of things that I would like to share. During early days of your startups, you're going to hear a lot of no's, a lot of them. Take those no's to heart, learn from it. Some of them are just noise, ignore it. Some of them are really trying to be helpful. Take those to heart and keep grinding. I remember during the early days of Wattpad, when they finally had some traction and I joined them, one of the things was basically beef up the content. So I spoke to many writers, or excuse me, what I call book lovers. And everybody was telling me, this is not going to work. Who's going to give you the book that they have written in the last 5 years or even 10 years with this soul and heart and tears and put it up for free for you to read? Who would do that? That's a dumb idea. Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of no people. And there were even people say, you know, Wattpad will not survive unless you sell books. So invite users or invite writers, let them share 2 chapters, and then, you know, have the rest of the user to pay, you know, for the rest of it and buy the book. You know, that's probably the business model. We had a lot of no-sayers, but we keep grinding because we saw some users just crazily, passionately doing what we wanted them to do. So rather than trying to please everyone, we focus on one user segment, understand their psychology so well that we built the product for them to be our ambassador, to tell the world how great our product is. So to me, that's what we're trying to, you know, what I call product market fit. Product market fit doesn't necessarily mean that you create a product that everybody loves. Of course, that will be super. Mm-hmm. But sometimes when you build a product, it starts off small. And as long as you get that passionate group of people and understand why they love you so much, and you use those levers to grow, then that will be great. Now, does it mean that you're going to get exit? The answer is no. But I think if for any founders, they pay keen attention to what their users are saying and doing, you will be able to grow a business. Obviously, not every single business is a venture backable company. You know, when you kind of make great coffee, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to sell your coffee shop for $600 million. That would be nice. But not every single coffee shop can be doing that. What I'm trying to say is, once you kind of get a sustainable business, once you kind of like push a transformation, a paradigm shifting a product or services, you will get notice from investors. You will get notice for those strategic people that want to have you under the wings. So don't try to build a business so that you can sell. Build a business that you can shine, and people will come.
Wow. I love that answer so much. Thank you so much. If you do have any Q&A, please feel free to drop it in the chat. I will continue monitoring the chat for the Q&A. I know we do have some questions that registrants have already sent in, so I'll be starting off on those. But if you have any live Q&A, please feel free to put in the chat. There's one that right now, actually, Sophia asked, why did you name it Wattpad?
Well, I didn't name it Wattpad. My husband did. You know, he and his co-founder, started the company. So Wattpad, you know, you got to go back to the early days of mobile phones. We're not talking about, you know, these kind of phones here. We're talking about those stupid, you know, phones that have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you know, as a keypad. If you want to type A, you need to press 1. B, you have to press 1, 1 twice. You know, remember how you kind of like type the letters?
Mm-hmm.
Do Wattpad. You only have to press every single button once.
Oh, interesting.
And
Wow.
not only that, Watt, W-A-T-T, is actually the unit to measure power.
Yes.
So it's
it is.
power pad.
Oh, that's so interesting. I love that. That's super cool. Someone asked you, what's in store for yourself in 2021, both personally and professionally?
You know what? This is something have been, you know, on my mind. You know, this Wattpad exit, you know, to Naver, certainly, you know, from a ecosystems perspective, is something very major. And what this means to us is that we have the opportunity to show other entrepreneurs in Canada that Canada, you know, building businesses, building tech startup, it's possible. And I think, you know, for us, you know, you remember what I said when I first started angel investing, what was the reason? It was because we want to be very much like Silicon Valley, that you can walk into a coffee shop and bump into founders that have been there and done that and have built something massive. Mm-hmm. If you actually read Beta Kit today, Shopify, a group of women senior leadership, has formed something called the Backbone Angels. They are the one who have been there and done that. With the Wattpad exit, a lot of the Wattpad early stage employees are already asking me, Eva, how can I start angel investing? So one step at a time, one company at a time. Soon there will be more and more exits in our ecosystem. We will have more and more people who have been there and done that. We will have more and more people that you can bump into in Starbucks and say, hey, how did you do that? Tell me a few growth hacks. We are on path to do that. So we will do that.
I wish we had a lot more of that. It's because when I was growing up, I mean, I don't think I had a lot of exposure to entrepreneurship, and I wish that a lot more young women did. Like, did you have a lot of exposure to entrepreneurship when you were growing up?
Well, I would say, you know, it was the very first company that I joined after I graduated. At the time when I joined them, you have to understand, you know, the culture of Chinese parents is like, you know, you got to find the golden rice bowl, you know, you go into a company and you die in that company, you know, get the retirement, and that will be the it of your life, right? My father worked in a company for 25 years. On the day he died, he still had that job. Wow. So that was what was expected of from me. So when I graduated, the economy was not very good, and I could only find a job in a startup, 30 people company, cheap pay. My mom was like, are you sure? Like, are they gonna fold? Are they gonna zap lap? I'm like,
yeah.
You want me to have no paycheck, or you want me to have a paycheck? So let's just have a paycheck. And when I joined them, they were very entrepreneurial. The founders, one of them was the CTO. He interviewed me, so I could be at the C-suite in some ways. You know, you're talking to the CTO, and the company grew so fast. In 3 years, they grew from 40 people to 700. So I ride that ride and saw how exponential when the technology and when the product is really transformative, it was like changing everything. Right. And that's when I caught the entrepreneurial bug. I'm like, wow, they sold the company for $400 million. You know, what is it? Well, I didn't actually get a lot because I was kind of relatively junior at the time, but that shows me that, wow, you know, Microsoft, you know, did that, and this company did that, and I'm like, wow, it's so cool to be in the tech, you know, startup ecosystem. Right. So that's when I actually become very entrepreneurial. Not that I was risk taking to a point that I would quit my job and start my own company, because, you know, when you were young, when you had that kind of upbringing, it's kind of like a psychological hurdle that you have overcome. So I'm glad that I have also a very entrepreneurial husband. And so we kind of like hit it off.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty crazy. My mom still says that to me all the time. And she's like, "Hey, hi, stop lava." I'm like,
Yeah.
no, not now. These like startups are just are so unstable, but something can happen all the time. It's a roller coaster ride and you just have to get on it, right?
Yes.
Okay, we have a lot of questions in the chat now. So Adam says, Eva, do you think Wattpad changes people in how they appreciate literature? So people, there's like AI technology that makes good writing popular by spontaneously instead of books that have been recommended by teachers in schools for years or like decades.
Well, I think, you know, the way that I want to address this issue is two-front. When we are talking about literature versus storytelling, you can say that it's the same thing, but I can also argue that it's two different things. When you watch, you know, a movie in the Sundance, you know, film festival that are, you know, very artistic or, you know, have some sort of, you know, stronger art value, they may not necessarily be something that your kids would love to watch. They love Disney, right? So same thing for storytelling and literature. Different genre address different group of people. For me, if you're talking about classic, the only type of classic that I would read is Jane Austen. Anything beyond that, I found it like, yeah, it's so boring. Like, what on earth? Like, you know, Shakespeare is something that I can never read, you know? But I love Twilight. I keep reading those 4 books over and over and over and over again, right? So to me, what I'm trying to say is one is entertainment, one is literature. I don't think they're conflicting. I think what it is that as long as people are reading and they are getting things out of those stories or literature that are life changing, or they have something that they can take away with, I think that's what essential. You know, that's why, you know, a lot of people, they don't necessarily read literature. Like I remember there was a Canadian writer, I think back in the days when I was in grade 13, it's called Margaret Lawrence. I think, oh my gosh, it was such a, you know, it's just so difficult for me to understand. First of all, English was my second language. And at the same time, you know, it's just not necessarily my genre. But when I read biography, I learn about how Steve Jobs started Apple. I read about how Jeff Bezos built Amazon. I read about how F. William and Jack Dorsey were kind of like, you know, having these politics behind the scene in Twitter. Those are fascinating for me. I read a book by Carl Fu Lee talking about AI superpower in China. Those are great, great, great learnings as well. So I think, you know, reading is just a type of, you can say, entertainment, but it's also something that people will draw value out of based on the topic that they're interested in. I hope that answered your questions, Adam.
Yeah, there's yeah, so many more. Vanessa said, I loved hearing Eva talk about her role as a mother, and I'm interested in hearing some of the lessons or advice she gives to her daughters.
You know what? This is a question that I actually was waiting for an opportunity to share. Specifically to those entrepreneurs or parents who are trying to kind of like get into entrepreneurship. I remember there was one very, very, very hard conversation that I had with my daughter when she was, I think, maybe 8 years old. At the time, she went to Montessori school, so it's a private, you know, kind of a study. She played the piano. I found her the best teacher. And she also figure skate. She loved figure skate the most. So remember, we have $2 per check $2 check per month, right? So it was very, very hard. So one day I went to her. I said, look, mommy and daddy are having some money problems. I may not necessarily be able to kind of like do everything you love anymore because we have to be, you know, in Cantonese, handi sai, you know, we have to be frugal. I said, I may, you know, you're going to a great school, you're learning piano from a great teacher, and you're doing figure skating, which is a money burning machine, you know, I cannot do all of them. Choose one that you're willing to give up. She was only 7, 8 years old. No joke. She looked at me, think a little bit. Mommy, I need good schooling so that I can find a good job when I get old. So I'm not going to change school. This is a great school. I'm not going to give up piano because one day I'm winning a lot of the competitions these days. So maybe one day I can help earn some more money when become a piano teacher. I'm not very good at figure skating. So maybe I'm going to quit figure skating. That was the heartbreaking moment for me because she loved figure skating the most. And yet she was willing to give up her most loved activity for the greater good of the family. So what I'm trying to say is we have to learn to appreciate our children. Sometimes we have a lot of expectation on them, especially when we're under stress. They're watching us and they're willing to chip in. We just have to include them in the conversation.
So you did treat her like in a very mature way, as if she was an adult, and you allowed her to.
Well, when you're at the end of the rope, you know that something has to give. Rather than you force on them, you have to ask them what they would like to do.
Mm-hmm. That's good advice. Karen, did you want us to stop soon, or do you mind us going for 2 other questions? Good. Okay. Tabasum asks, for tech startups, what would you say is the best place to direct your limited dollars today?
I'm so sorry. I was distracted because I looked at all the messages. There are like so many of them. So what was your question again? Sorry, Michelle.
For tech startups, what would you say is the best place to direct your limited dollars today, especially if you're bootstrapping?
Do nothing, but to make sure that you find product market fit. Do nothing, but make sure that you find that little feature in the product that people loves and would be telling the whole world about it. A lot of the times, a lot of people, they thought that, oh, a startup, I actually have to raise money and do some marketing. Let me tell you, if you're building a car that is not, you know, necessarily functioning, you put a ton of marketing money. Yeah, people will come and check it out, but very quickly they're going to go away because it's a useless piece of junk. Don't waste your money on that. Make sure that you have a good running engine that is doing something awesome, that you have a small group of people who love it so much that will continue to tell the world about it. Then you can grow.
So what are your tangible actions for people to be able to find that product market fit?
Talk to your customer. Build something, iterate fast. You know, if you're building something, it's particularly in a tech company, then, you know, build a small product. Don't build something massive, like with all the bells and whistles. You know, sometimes engineers, or I should say, tech founders have this problem of like, I have to finish the product before I release it. There's no such thing called finish the product. Just build the minimal viable product, MVP, that is functioning to prove a hypothesis. Launch it, test it. People hated it, then that means your hypothesis was wrong. Iterate, send out another version, get feedback. People loving it, why they're loving it. This is the most important part. Why they are loving it. Don't assume they love it because of whatever, you know, hypothesis that you have. Validate it. And then iterate on the feedback until you actually see the natural growth of usage without you pushing anybody. So let's say you launch a product, you launch it, you know, let's say to a public, to 100 people. Only one person tried it and repeatedly coming back. You either look at that one person and say, why the hell he loves it so much, but not the rest of the people, or the fact that maybe this is just not working. And then until you kind of like keep iterating and let's say you have 30, 40% of the people continuously using a product, then maybe you have a product market fit. Understand why these 30, 40 people loving it, using it, and then iterate on that.
Right. Maureen's question is, nowadays, because of advanced technology, our patience span seems to be shorter and shorter. So is our persistence. So how do you keep up with your persistence in the startup world?
This is a very good question because, you know, in a way, you know, let me just kind of rephrase what you're asking, because I've been asked twice in two different ways. How do you keep motivated, you know, when you actually hit a lot of roadblocks? You know, because that's what the whole persistence is all about. Like, if you are going cruising on, there's no persistence question here, because you're loving it, everything is hunky-dory, you just keep going, right? Nothing's wrong with it. Persistence, you know, by asking that question, you're already assuming that you're running into some hurdles, that you want to give up. You're like, not working, let me try something else. My way of keeping us motivated is to not be driven emotionally. So a lot of the times when we look at, oh my gosh, this is too hard, or no, this is no way out, and you want to give up. A lot of the times, those decisions comes when your emotional was very high, especially when you're very exhausted. You thought that you've tried everything. You're like, I'm done with this. This is it. I'm done. What I would say is turn those emotions, pull those back, and measure your progress quantitatively. And use that as your guideline. So, for example, when we were building Wattpad, me and Alan keep saying, if we have to sell the house, that will be it. That will be the end of Wattpad, because we will only lose the house and we don't want to accumulate more debt. That is the line on the sand that I will never cross. Then that's what I do. When I keep running and running and running, I run into roadblocks many times. But because I haven't reached that line yet, I still have my house. I am not allowed to give up. You see the difference? Mm-hmm. So many times, you know, when you're building a company, you know, you may bet on a feature, or you may bet on something that users, you know, are going to love it or not loving it. You just have to be very quantitative. I'm going to give it another 3 weeks for this feature to run. If within these 3 weeks, there's no growth, zero growth, something is not working. You know, let's not kind of keep barking on the wrong tree. Or within this 3 weeks, you do everything you can to understand why this is not working. But you only give yourself 3 weeks rather than, oh, I sit here for 3 days and it's not working. Maybe something's wrong. Let me just try to, you know, fix it. Be quantitative to measure your progress and guide your decisions based on these quantitative. Now, then people will be asking, is emotions completely useless then? No. Emotion is another dimension that you bring in, but under the lens of mental health. If you grinding and grinding, yeah, you know, you said, you know, I'm not going to finish, I'm not going to stop until I have to sell my house. But what if before you reach that, you're already broken down? You're completely, you know, crazy that you have to have antidepressant, you know, you have suicidal thoughts. Well, then don't wait till you get to that line, because you're already at the end of the rope. So that's where the emotion comes in. The emotion is not to drive your decisions. The emotion is to have a mental health check. Kind of like not obvious, but it makes a huge difference. So that it will help you not to give up too soon, but at the same time, give you some safeguards at guardrails so that you don't fall off the cliff in the realm of mental health.
I liked how you added the mental health part in there. I was just going to ask you about that, because more and more I've heard a lot of founders talking about that. Recently, one of the founders that we actually work with posted a long LinkedIn post about how she's been working so hard and so under-resourced as a female founder that she actually landed herself in the ICU from like stress-induced heart something, like cardiovascular disease. And that's the line, right? That's something that she's now moving forward going to realize in my next company, or when I come back to this company, I'm going to need to have some sort of mental health check. And there has been a lot of stigma around mental health over the last few decades. And I think it's really important that we did talk about it.
I think it's nothing to be ashamed of. Like if you have a cold, you sneeze, will people say, hey, yo, you sneeze, you know, I mean, you sneeze, right? If you have a fever, you're like, oh, I have a fever, I have a headache. Well, then you have a fever, you have a headache. Like if you're mentally not well, then you're like, you know what, I'm mentally not well, I'm anxious right now.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference?
Exactly.
One is having, you know, immune, you know, cells, you know, fighting with the virus. But then the other is, you know, you have an imbalance in your brain cells that you need a reset.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just health issues. I suffer from depression before, you know, and what's wrong with it? You know, you take care of yourself and you get well and you keep, you know, you come back.
And that was part of your story when you were like, it was a mental health break and you needed it and you came back even stronger and you're a VC now.
Hey, that doesn't mean that I don't have mental health struggles. It just means that I learned better to watch out for my signs, knowing when I'm about to break. So before I even get there, I'm like, hold on a second. I need to slow down, or hold on a second. I have to stop thinking that way, or hold on a second. I have to ignore this person who keeps giving me that kind of like a trigger. You learn about what is important to you, then you filter out the noise. You're not going to be successful all the time, but you learn and be better next time around.
Right. I'm just going to ask you one last question before I pass it back to Amy and Karen. Celine from Sunday Glow says she's an early stage founder. She says, do you think organic growth should be solely focused on? If so, when is it good timing to invest dollars into paid marketing?
Organic growth is ultra important during the early days. As I keep saying, you know, just think about it this way. I'll give you an example. So, you know, you're in the carriage, you know, era, you know, in the Victorian era, everyone was riding the buggy with horses and things like that. And you know that this is not going to be, you know, a long way to do, because horses will die, it's expensive and all those kind of things. So you're trying to kind of invent something. Okay. Where was I? Sorry, I lost my train of thoughts. All in a sudden.
Horses and carriages.
What was the question again?
When to put money into
when to put. So if you think that, you know, you have something that is gonna work very, very well. So you invented a buggy with 6 carrot baskets, and you think that's gonna solve the problem because now you have more carrots that you can feed the horses. And you say, this is the best invention. I'm going to spend all the money in it. You may actually, you know, feel that's the good solution. But then the horse carriage owner said, are you crazy? Now that I'm, you know, having 8 baskets of carrots, I need actually more horses to carry the thing because it's heavier. But you just burn all the money to have people buy these buggies with, you know, to sell ads to kind of like come get the buggies with the 8 baskets. But it's actually not a fit. There's no product market fit. Nobody wants a buggy with 8 baskets because it's too heavy. So then you wasted all the money thinking that if anybody know my great invention, my company is going to grow. So that's why organic growth is like, you have one person buy this buggy with 8 carrot basket. Who is he? Why would he do that? Does he worry about, you know, being heavy? Right? Those are the things, those are the questions you need to ask until you know exactly, you know what? The buggy with 8 basket, they only sell to those people who wants to go long haul, who wants to kind of like, you know, and they have a lot of money, or each trip will allow them to earn a lot of money. That's my market. So I will only place ads for that particular segment. So that's what I meant by, you know, during early days, organic growth is like this guy, you know, who bought this, you know, 8 basket buggy is telling his friend who is doing long haul travel, who is, you know, doing this kind of like a delivery and making a ton of money. So you keep seeing the repeat pattern of what these people are coming and buying, and you understand, oh, that's why they love it. That's why they're doing it. Then you can put the money and say, I'm going to sell this product to these type of people, because you see the organic growth, you see the signs of a product market fit before you actually put money in it. Make sense?
Does that answer your question, Celine? Yeah, so I think we should just wrap it up right here. We got through all the Q&A, so we're lucky to be able to do that. Eva, do you have any final words for our audience and where they can find you? And then we'll pass it back to Amy and Karen here.
Well, you know, I'm on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Insta. Mrs. Eva Lau, it's my handle. So you're welcome to connect me on LinkedIn, on Insta, and on Twitter. Just one thing I want to kind of also say is that, you know, this is ACCE. So predominantly, you know, we will be seeing a lot of Asian entrepreneurs or the Asian community, Asian Canadian community. But I'm also want to kind of like also highlight, you know, the community here is very inclusive. I've seen a lot of people on the call here that aren't necessarily Asians, and they are, you know, very supportive, and they are very interested to learn about, you know, what we are talking about here. So I want to thank you for being allies, especially in this era when, you know, anti-Asian hate crimes is on the rise. I am so thankful for everyone who are non-Asian and here to support us. We need more people like you to be our allies, because together then we can become a unit, and we can then change the world to be more inclusive, more dynamic, and we can collaborate and make the next innovations together. Thank you.